we know that Vindman testified against President Trump. He's subsequently been removed from his post. The National Security Council is saying that this is part of a much-needed and overdue downsizing, but it doesn't really look that good. Democrats say he was essentially fired. What's your take on this, Hal?
Well, Michelle, it gets into what's the definition of fired. The reality is he was on loan from the Pentagon. He's not a federal employee that was hired to the National Security Council per se. Basically what he is he's a military officer. He's assigned to the NSC. The NSC does fleet up and fleet down at times. They will increase their size, their staff. Under President Bush, they were about 100. Under President Obama, they were about 200, and right now they're downsizing. So there's a lot of reasons for him to be reassigned back to the Pentagon. My understanding is he's going to the War College this summer, so he's already been selected for a rather prestigious next assignment. And there's plenty of things at the Pentagon for a lieutenant colonel with his credentials and his security clearance to do for the next few months before he goes over there.
All right, so there's no indication that he's going to get any pay cut or any significant demotion by this reassignment.
Michelle, there really isn't anything. I mean, obviously the optics are one thing. It's not great to be escorted out of the White House by a security guard. However, I will say there are reasons why things like that are done, in case they want to go through and look at all of his papers and anything else to make sure that nothing wanders out. And that's been a problem in Washington, D.C. But basically, as far as I can tell, I don't even know if he got an adverse officer evaluation. It may be a good evaluation. He may be fine.
Well, I want to talk to you about his valuation because Tim Morrison, who oversaw the National Security Council policy on Europe and Russia during the time of that July call, he told impeachment investigators in the House that others in the NSC raised concerns about Vindman's judgment and worried that he may be leaking. Morrison also said that he wished that Colonel Vindman had come to him first with his concerns about that July call instead of the NSC lawyers. But in this case, Hal, was he right not to follow the chain of command if he had these concerns that he seemed to have had?
I have to tell you, basically it's ingrained. You always follow the chain of command. And before you'd ever bring something like that up, certainly before Congress, you would have talked to those within your chain of command to bring up those types of concerns. Very unusual that he did what he did. Now, truth is that sometimes things like that do happen. Congressional inquiries get launched from subordinates in the unit because they don't see the chain of command as being responsive. But then again, he's a lieutenant colonel. He's not a lance corporal. There's a whole difference in terms of how commissioned officers, particularly field grade commissioned officers, conduct themselves in these situations.
You know, it's interesting that it came out in the impeachment hearing that he was in fact offered the position of a defense secretary for the Ukrainians. Look, Hal, Colonel Vindman is one thing, but his twin brother was also reassigned, and he wasn't involved in the impeachment trial at all. Ambassador Sondland has been recalled. Is it a valid concern that whether it's fired or reassigned, that this could potentially deter other people from speaking out when they think that something inappropriate may be happening?
I think that's what Chuck Schumer was talking about when he said he wanted to reach. He basically sent a letter to all 74 inspector generals throughout the government, basically to say, take a look at how your whistleblowers are being treated. Make sure that there's not a dampening effect on the whistleblower protections, you know, that people are willing to come forward. Although I will say that when you see something as public as this, anybody who is thinking about blowing the whistle is probably going to think twice about it. It doesn't normally go well for whistleblowers, historically speaking. Things usually get bad and sometimes get much worse before they ever get better. So, and whistleblowers, some are legit, some are not so legit. So they have to ferret that out. So there's pluses and minuses.
Well,